Hi folks, welcome to lecture 7, the COUNTIFS function, multi-conditional counting. In this lecture, we're going to talk about the COUNTIFS function and its ability to incorporate multiple conditions. First, we're going to have a look at a typical scenario that can be solved by the COUNTIFS. We'll then examine the COUNTIFS elements, and just before we conclude the lecture, we'll take a look at the exercise and the quiz for this lecture. Let's kick this off, shall we? Let's take a look at a typical calculation scenario that can be resolved by the COUNTIFS function. Suppose that you work at a car dealership. You've been presented with two tables. The first table is your sales to date. The second is the summary of your sales by the car make and dealership. Your task is to count the number of sales by the make and the branch. So here you are presented with two criteria for your counting: the car make and the branch. If you were to do this manually, you would utilize the two criteria in table 2 to manually spot and count where they're found in table 1, where they're found on the same row. Let's have a look at this. Aston Martin and Ease is found twice. Therefore, the count of sales is 2. BMW and North is found once. Therefore, the count of sales is 1. You get the idea. Well, folks, this very action is what the COUNTIFS does or designed to do. Let's examine the syntax for the COUNTIFS. The COUNTIFS has a dynamic number of arguments depending on the number of criteria. In a 2 criteria scenario, the COUNTIFS has 4 arguments. Let's take a look at the syntax. Let's resolve the example problem from earlier on for the purpose of illustration. I've typed in the function in cell I3. The first argument is criteria range 1. This refers to the range where the first criteria expected to be found in. And if the conditions are met, the cell would then be counted in. In our case, the car makes in table 2 are expected to be found in table 1's column A. Therefore, our first argument is column A. The second argument is the actual first criteria for counting. In our example, is the car makes listed in table 2. And our first is on cell G3, Aston Martin. Moving on, the third argument is very similar to the first argument. It's criteria range 2. This refers to the range where the second criteria expected to be found in. And if found or met, the cell would then be counted in. In our case, the third argument is table 1's column B, the branch. The last argument is the second count criteria. In our case, the second count criteria is the branches listed in table 2. And our first is on cell H3, the East branch. The count calculation will only execute if both the make and the branch criteria are met. The COUNTIFS provides lots of flexibility in counting, particularly with its ability to incorporate multiple criteria, which is a very common scenario in the big data world we live in. Let's now talk about the exercise for this lecture. You've been handed 2 tables. The first is the full list of your company's customers. The second is the summary of number of customers by city, state, and country. Your task is to fill in tables 2 number of customers. If you take a closer look at this, there are 3 criteria. So please construct your COUNTIFS function to accommodate for 3, not for 2. Use your findings from this lecture and the exercise to complete the quiz. Best of luck and see you in the next lecture.